Well, we've got protocol in the United States for hospitals, which is a eugenics protocol. It's called Complete Lives. A funny name, right? They always put names that don't arouse, suspicion. That protocol was put together under Obamacare. A lot of things are in Obamacare that, no, they're not for the good of the people. It's quite the opposite. I went after the psychiatric abuse. And actually, I have to say, one of the things, after that article, really, that threw me, because I didn't think that, that such experiments could be done and would be done in the United States. And I found many more. I mean, that's just it. This is not a one-time thing. And then I got together a group of families whose children or sibling, a sister or brother, were abused in psychiatric facilities all across the country. And I brought them to Washington at that time, it was the President's Commission on Human Rights or something like that. And each one told their story. Now, what's interesting, the president of that commission at that time was, what was his name? He was head of Johns Hopkins. And they told their stories, and I addressed the issue of money. How much money is involved in these kind of experiments? And it was as if I had thrown a stink bomb or something, we don't talk about money. We don't talk about money. You mean you don't? I didn't know at the time, I found out later, that he was on the board of directors of one of the major chemical companies. He doesn't know about money. What's that? That's not for nothing. Those, directorships, when the scientists are on these boards, they're paid very nicely. Dow Chemical. He doesn't talk about money. Well, the day that this took place was also the day that there was a big story in the New England Journal about AIDS experiments on pregnant women in Africa. And that took all the media went after that, because it was with Marsha Angel, who was, the editor of the New England. It was a whole, so we didn't get any publicity then. But what happened was that there was some other venue in Washington, and one of the mothers whose daughter had been abused at the Maryland psychiatric facility, I had her come and tell her story along with what the others were telling, because I didn't organize this. Well, there was a reporter there from Boston, and that reporter called me and she said, I forgot her name now. I'm very bad with names. That was always. She said her testimony isn't transcribed on the website the way everybody else's is. I said, yeah, isn't that interesting? Why not? So she had a story. She realized, hey, that's a story. At that time, there were still reporters who understood what a story is. Today, you really have very few journalists who will recognize that, hey, if something's being hidden, obviously that's where the story is, not what they put out officially. Well, that wound up being a 5-part series in the Boston Globe, where they told the story of all of the ones that I brought. And the director of the National Institute of Mental Health who then went back to Harvard. He saw that, and he ordered an investigation of all their research. What are they doing there? I had met with him before a few times, so I already let him know. But he stopped 28 clinical trials at the National Institute of Mental Health. That never happened. So that's an accomplishment. And he did it saying either they didn't meet ethical standards or scientific standards. Exactly. The two actually can go together. Not always do, but they can. So 28 out of their whatever they had at the time. So that they don't talk about that. They don't talk about, but that is something that, again, at that time, the Boston Globe ran these stories with their pictures, illustrate. That wouldn't happen today. Today, it's much, much more censored, much more controlled.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The French public, they discovered you during the COVID period. How did you get through this strange period? You were you react quickly to, you publish quite a few videos during this period. How did you get through this period? What did you achieve during?
Okay. I live in New York City, and that was an epicenter. Oh, there was oh my God, the thousands and all that. There were a couple of women. I don't know them, but I got emails about it. I saw what they went with their iPhones to the hospitals in New York City, all the hospitals. They were empty. The hospitals were empty. Only 3 hospitals were overcrowded because everybody was sent only to those 3. So that's how they created the idea of, they're dying, this pandemic is so terrible and all that. So I knew once I saw hospitals are empty and they're telling us they're full, I said, that's it. This is just a facade. So I knew the whole thing was nothing. And all along, there were a lot of signals that people should have read, which some did, but too few, where a lot of those who were telling us about how terrible and all that, and were keeping people in fear, they were going to parties. They were having dinner parties. So if it was wouldn't they protect themselves? But obviously they knew it was a farce. I also had, during this time, in April of 2020, I had been going through with my husband, who was very ill for about 12, 14 years. And this was the end. And he was in a, call it a assisted living place. But everything was shut. I couldn't see him. For 3 weeks, I didn't see him, which that is not what killed him. However, and they did let me come the last 2 days. I knew already when he died, I called the doctor who was at a hospital, who, by the way, never saw him. It was a different, this is medicine today. I called him and I said, don't put down cause of death COVID, because he didn't die of COVID. And he said, I have to. I said, I'll fight you all the way. I suggest you don't do it. I guess he convinced the hospital to forego tens of thousands of dollars, because that's what was going on. Every patient that they said was COVID got extra, lots of money. So that's why everybody died of COVID. And meantime, there was no more pneumonia, there was no more flu, nothing. It all disappeared, everything. So it's a big lie. Now, look, I'm reasonably intelligent, but I'm not an expert, and I don't say I'm an expert. But if I can put 2 and 2 together and 3 and 4, I mean, where is everybody? Brain dead? All they have to do is use their common sense, their experience. You know, you really, to be fully human is to use your own resources, not to rely on somebody else to make decisions for you, for your child. That is a terrible dereliction of a responsible human being. The fact that so many of the educated class are the unthinking class now, totally. They're afraid to think.
Afraid?
They have been conditioned not to question authority. That was very much a German medical education. And everybody in Europe and America is following that. You see differences. You know, in India, there are Dr. Chetty, and, you know, and I knew very well Dr. Zelenko, who he saved 4,000 to 5,000 people alone, just he. And they made such hell for him. So, yeah, I mean, doctors who act as real doctors and as real human beings and didn't forget the Hippocratic Oath, they're the ones who are being terrorized.
I saw that you draw parallels between the Nazi regimes and the health policies during this COVID crisis. What are those parallels you're talking about?
What about what the well? We talked about the fact that the nursing home, that the elderly were sent away from hospitals and were told to go to nursing homes. And as I said, I'm in New York, and I early on, when I read that, I started to talk about our governor, Andrew Cuomo, and you know, people from the alternative. Oh, no, you can't say that. No, they didn't know. And I said, what are you talking about, didn't know? I'm not saying anything. I'm quoting him word for word. Because Andrew Cuomo, right at the beginning, gave orders, official order in New York State, that hospitals were not to treat the elderly. They were to be sent to nursing homes. And he said, he predicted, I didn't say it, he did. He said, this virus in nursing homes will be like fire through dry grass. And then, yes, then he gave immunity, legal immunity, both to hospitals and to nursing homes. And he gave the order. Now, it just so happens, you know, you think about, okay, so they wanted to get rid of the elderly because they're useless eaters, right? Untermenschen. But there's another thing about it. Insurance. Insurance companies made a lot of money by getting rid of elderly who would have had to draw insurance, paid dues all their lives. And guess who the biggest contributors to Andrew Cuomo's career elections was? The insurance industry. Voila. It's a perfect match. That's how bad things are. See, now there's also the money. Well, there was money involved at the time with the Nazis as well. All their collaborators were in it for money. Plus ça change, plus la même chose. Yeah.
Who benefit the more from the COVID? Were the societies, maybe the business who benefit the more from the COVID, so according to you?
The businesses simply transferred huge wealth from the middle class, from the little shops. No more little shops. It's all gone. Everything has to be Amazon, TikTok and all this kind of, nothing where it's human to human. What people need to really understand, and I don't think they get it yet. The technology today that we're all used to, right? It's a double-edged sword. We think of it, and it's been sold to us as, oh, you'll communicate, it's so convenient, it's so much better, you don't have. What's the price? What are we paying for that? Total surveillance. Every one of these gadgets they're collecting our data. People are preparing for electric chargers for the cars. That's, again, those cars are perfect surveillancing where they can stop you. If they tell you can only go 15 kilometers and you want to go 20, it'll stop. Bingo. They can stop all traffic centrally. Whereas with gas, you need a lot of trucks, you need a lot of people involved. And as it was in the Soviet Union, when they tried, everything state-ordered and state-owned, oh boy, the black market was doing fantastically. You always have a lot of people black market, that's all. With technology, if you go for the electric and you do everything here, I had something happen yesterday. A Metro card. I thought I had to add some money to it. So I put my credit card, American Express, and guess what? The machine swallowed my card. I said, what? It swallowed the card. That tells you something. It can be done, I mean, just like that, you have no control.
Mm-hmm. I've read that you talk about one eugenics agenda during this COVID crisis. Isn't it excessive to talk about eugenics agenda?
Yeah, well, the eugenics agenda, it's 19th century, just the same as when nationalism, when it wound up Nazism, but you really had nationalism and you had communism and you had fascism and socialism and Zionism. All of that was in the 19th century. And eugenics is the driving force of the scientific. They still teach Darwin as if it's true. People do not come from apes. It's totally different. It's a lie. But the lie keeps on going. Along with that and with nationalism, they developed the idea, Übermenschen, we're better than you. Okay? And they created this whole thing, races. This, again, it's all nonsense, but it wore the cap of science. This is pseudoscience. It has no scientific validity at all, but it's still, people have that, they hold on to it. And so everything, you saw it especially, with the Nazi state, because it was all under one control, but they really learned a lot of the things from the United States. The United States, so many states had laws with forced sterilization. That was here, and they learned it from here, and they used a lot of the material that was written here. And that eugenics thread continues to be very much without using the word. They stopped using the word after the Nazis, no more eugenics. So you have genetics, big deal. You know, designer babies, all sorts of things that you're manipulating. You're doing things, quote, to improve humanity. You're not improving humanity. You're trying to fashion it into superhumans, right? Transhumans is now the, but this is all part of eugenics. The idea of always the Übermenschen and Untermenschen. This race is okay, and this race should be the ones who scrub the floor. That is, I guess, humanity's worst. It's a sin against all humanity. Once you feel that superiority, and you can feel it, you know, they exude it when you listen to Klaus Schwab and all these people. I mean, come on. Or Tedros. I mean, you know, these are thugs. These are really thugs. They're killers. What are they? But they're given the aura, you know, of knowing, you know, or Harari, Yuval Harari. We can hack human beings. Hack. Really? They're deluded. They think that they will remain and we'll all be slaves. And the thing is that if people don't wake up and just say no, that's all. That's all we have to say.
Mm-hmm.
If millions say no, they can't. They have no power.
Okay. What do you mean when you're speaking about a catastrophic junction? You say we're at a catastrophic junction in human history. What do you mean?
What I mean is that during the Nazi regime, which was low tech, right? It wasn't high tech, but it was tech. It was industrial. That's what it was so new about it. But it was low tech. Those who jumped off trains, those who hid in basements, those who had friends hide them, they survived. Those who went as they were told, they were killed. That's what's happening now. And what is so frightening is that when COVID was announced, everybody thought they had to obey. Oh, the virus, the virus, the virus. That's the danger. And this, that they could make people believe in such nonsense. And when I say nonsense, I'm getting into an area where the scientists are fighting with each other. Is there such a thing as a virus? Is there not such a thing? Whether there is or there isn't, I'm going to leave to them to punch it out. But what I will say is that a virus that's very infectious cannot be lethal because it kills the host. It can't go anywhere. On the other hand, a virus like a common cold, that's very infectious, but so you get it, you know, a few days later, that's the difference. So to be frightened irrationally is the same way as we were frightened during the Cold War. Oh, the Reds are coming, the commies are coming, and I was in school when we had to take cover under our desks. Like that's going to save us from the atom bomb. Well, I saw they had a video during COVID. They tried to redo that. Somehow somebody must have told them, you better take it down because it's a joke. But it was, they did it again. They tried, but at that time it was all over the place, you know, take cover, you know, and throw yourself against the wall, against this. It's irrational. And of course, yes, under the Nazis, they did the same thing. They kept people in fear and fear and fear of the enemy and fear of this and fear of that. If you keep people in fear, that's what Goebbels said, and he was right. You keep people in fear, you control them. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the worst precipice because now, if people don't many people, rebel and reject, they're going to be pushed into a digital concentration camp. And from that, you can't escape. There's no escape. That's the difference. As horrible as all that was, there were possibilities still of, escaping it. Now there won't be. If people march in, that's it. It's over. If people take that digital ID, which would be like for everything, they are volunteering for slavery. That's why.
Do you think people are more likely to resist and to fight and to decide not to obey today more than in 2020?
I hope so. I think they are. I personally think that a change happened, sort of, as we call it, a line in the sand was drawn. When the FDA gave its okay to give the shots to the 6-month-olds, the babies, that's when the mamas woke up and said no. The mamas said no. And now the mamas are not taking their children for any shots. Okay. That's awakening. That's a huge thing. That, you see, because for so many years, parents of damaged children with autism and all sorts of neurological damage from the different vaccines, nothing really changed. It didn't happen. People continued to think that it was the best thing to do for your children. But this changed it.
What's about the principle of the Nuremberg Code? Do you think we can still rely today on those principles to get protection?
It's a legal document. This is what's so important. And I have a little booklet just with the code. If people use that code when they go to the doctor and say, okay, I want to know what's in it, what are the risks, just go like that. It is. And the reason the medical profession don't like it is because it can't be changed. You see, the Helsinki, every couple of years they change it. If they have a new drug that they want, they change a few words and make it okay. You can't touch the Nuremberg Code because it is part of a legal decision. So I say the Nuremberg Code is like the 10 Commandments. You can't change a word. That makes it, it makes it very compelling. The thing is, it needs to be used. If people would take it more to court. Now, in the United States, there have been several decisions where the judge cited the Nuremberg Code. Absolutely. And it's not been challenged. And Pfizer actually was found guilty based on the Nuremberg Code in a case that didn't even involve in the United States. It was in the New York court, federal court, but it was Nigeria. They tested an antibiotic that was very bad, and it killed some children and harmed many children. And the court decided on the favor of the families.
You wrote or told somewhere that a large company like IBM participated in the extermination program through technologies. Do you think the digital passport is an extension of this issue?
Sure. Now it's even more so. That's what we're talking about, that technology. Exactly. IBM at that time had the prototype of computer. It was very clumsy. It was a punch card system, and I know it. I've seen it. But without it, it would not have gone so smoothly, so industrial. Because what they did was early on, the minute Hitler took power, the president went to Berlin to meet with Hitler and say, anything you want, we'll do for you. And what they did was have massive sensor. They went around and took information from people and took massive information and put that into those punch cards. So this was, today you would have it on a computer, which they do. And that was the key to rounding up every Jew that they, first in Germany and Austria, and then in the other occupied countries. That gave them all the information, including the assets, including their profession, including where they worked, where they, education, just everything on those cards. And the fact of the matter is those punch cards, and they had to have staff because they needed a lot of more, I guess they just needed to be worked on with more people, actually. They were at many of the camps. And those numbers that some people had, certainly from Auschwitz and several other camps, it's not in all camps, those were IBM IDs. And here we are. So again, talk about parallel. Green passport, what do you mean green passport? It's an ID. Mm-hmm. Those IDs are very, very ominous, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. They give total control. And now, as I said, electronically, you can't avoid it.
Mm-hmm. So the Nazi principles are still here today. Do you think we can, in your opinion, can we speak about the Fourth Reich? Fourth Reich?
Well, they sure want it. What do you think? The great new reset and the great new world and all these things, they talk about it. What is it? Of course, it's Fourth Reich. Yeah. And as I said earlier, Nazis are not only German. Okay? Mm-hmm. Nazis are, yes. Okay. They're French, they're American, they're all over. Mm-hmm. It's really like a cult. Pretty much like a cult. And they're very ambitious.
Are you making links between Nazism and transhumanism? Are there links between transhumanism and Nazism?
Transhumanism? Well, yeah, transhumanism is really just an extension of eugenics. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the idea that you can shape people, do with them whatever you feel like. If you think about Frankenstein, Mary, what was her last name, who wrote it? I mean, that was a brilliant rendition of what some evil people can think of and would do. See, part of the problem, the reason that so many people fell for COVID, is they cannot comprehend the mind of evil people. They can't, because they're not evil. They're not 100% straight, of course, they lie a little bit here and maybe they took something that doesn't belong, but it's not real evil. So they can't comprehend that there are those who are truly evil and planning to destroy humanity and the world the way we want to live in it. They do want that kind of a dystopian world where a few, control everybody else. Mm-hmm. And if people understood that they mean to enslave their children, and their children will never see the blue sky. If they understood that, they would rebel. Mm-hmm. They need to hear the gory details, yes. And I've had arguments with people. Oh, you don't. It's too dark. It's too dark. I said, hell. What do you think this is about? Well, I'm not as informed as you are, but maybe in 3 years. I said, lady, in 3 years, you may not be here. You may not have a choice anymore. This is the point. They don't understand the urgency of the situation right now. Mm-hmm. Right now, I believe that those who have brought this, who planned it and have brought this whole thing on us, are in a in a frame of that it's not going quite the way they expected. Mm-hmm. There are more of us who are saying, we're not playing ball. We're not going along. We're not afraid of you. All you can do is kill, but can you kill 8 billion people? We're almost 8 billion, right? They really thought, well, I don't know. You tell me in France, if they announced a bird flu or monkey flu or squirrel flu or wolf, whatever, are people going to again say anything you say, aye, aye? That's the question. That's the question. Because if enough say, no, we're not going to stand 3 feet or 6 feet or not going to wear a mask, they have no power if people don't obey. They have a lot of power if people obey. They make it easy for them.
Okay. Can you tell me a word about your documentary, Never Again, It's Now and It's Global? How was it perceived by the people who watch it?
Well, it's been, all over the world, yes. It certainly is being avoided. Nobody in the mainstream, of course, touches anything like that. But, I get a lot of mail from people. And the fact is that, let me put it a little bit differently. There's such a thing as zeitgeist. And all along, this goes back to our discussion about medicine. I want to point this out, but I don't want to forget it, and I can talk about this, the movie as well. All the years, the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet, and I'm sure others, they didn't touch Nazi medicine. All of a sudden, November 2023, the Lancet published something like 789 articles, all about Nazi medicine. Many of these had been published before, but they put it, the New England, 3 months later, in March 2024, a whole issue about Nazi medicine. And the editorial wrote, yes, the New England in all the years was much too much concerned with eugenics. They admit it. That's why they didn't touch it. Now, this tells me a lot. Because when people, try to shut me up, how can you compare? How can you compare? I said, yeah, how can I compare? Because it's in front of me. But the fact that these medicals are suddenly, they feel a need somehow, that means something's in the air. Well, we've got protocol in the United States for hospitals, which is a eugenics protocol. It's called Complete Lives. A funny name, right? They always put names that don't arouse, suspicion. That protocol was put together under Obamacare. A lot of things are in Obamacare that, no, they're not for the good of the people. It's quite the opposite, the horror thing. Now, listen to this. The Complete Lives puts a value on human lives. The most valuable, who are to get whatever medical treatment, no matter what cost, are teenagers and young adults. Because they're valuable. They have value. The least valuable are the babies and the elderly. Yep. And that's how it is. And during COVID, that's exactly what they were doing. That's how they got rid of the elderly also, and the disabled.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What's the purpose behind all this? What is the agenda? Who is behind this, what we call a cabal? Mm.
Well, you know, until a lot of things have been brought out, I really wasn't, you know, cabal and cults but you can't ignore it anymore. You can't ignore it. One of the things that is now also transgender, there's another crime against humanity. Everything that is about civilization, everything about culture, they destroy it. And they're going at it in every direction. First, all the dumping immigrants in all areas. We have it in New York, I know you have it in Paris, and this is all to disrupt society. To have, you know, strangers among you who don't care about you. And if tomorrow they put a uniform on them and give them a gun, hey, bedlam. Because they have no connection to the people. To take teenagers and mutilate, you know, them sexually. Those are the ones that commit suicide. It's not the other way around, you know. To start by confusing children about their sexuality when they're little, what's the purpose of that? You see, it's evil. We're talking about people who have no conscience, no empathy for people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very hard to realize that nothing was learned from the Holocaust. On the contrary, they're doing everything to not to learn the lessons that it teaches, because then they can't go on with their planned agenda. And that's just it. Look, I mean, one has to really stop and think. In 2020, when the order was given all across the world, right? Lockdown, and everybody in front of the television. That was the propaganda was working really overtime. And you say to yourself, wait a minute. How is it possible to have that without it being coordinated? Again, use your common sense. They all came to the same conclusion at the very same moment? No. They have rehearsed, and they actually, it's there for people to see. It's been rehearsed, it's been written, everything is written on the World Economic Forum, it's all there. What the plan is, how they're going to do. And they've been working at it for many, many years. It's not new. This was planned, was organized. I mean, there's a poem that I read for, which is, it was not an accident. Nothing was an accident. And that's really true. And once you know that, you have to say, well, wait a minute. It can't be Joe Biden who's planning all this, right? I mean, who in their right mind believes that the United States for 4 years has been governed by Joe Biden? It's absurd. So who is behind the curtain? Somebody else, right? Someone's giving orders. Someone's telling the Israelis what to do. Someone is telling, you know, I mean, in Ukraine, I mean, come on. These are complicated, you know, things that are going on, and without anybody ordering. This is, again, it's so obvious that everything is planned, coordinated.
Mm-hmm. You gave an interview you had an interview with lawyer Rainer Fulmich, and you called for working together. What would you advise us to to fight or to work together?
The big thing too is to stop them from their big plan, to stop bickering over details. So, for example, there's a lot with the WHO, the World Health Organization, the treaties, and people spent more than a year tinkering with the legalities, and I say it's absurd because, first of all, the World Health Organization is just one organization among 17 or 18 of the United Nations. All those international parts of it are immune totally from any accountability in any jurisdiction. No country can, nothing. They can rape, they can do whatever they want, and you cannot go near them. They're immune. Well, then if that's the case, what the hell difference does it make? Whether, whether section E or F or whatever, it's silly. You really have to say, wait a minute, if they cannot be held accountable, then they can't make us do anything either. So it's your own government. You have to get out of it. In fact, the one thing that Trump did, but he got out of the UN, but then what did he do? He gave the money to Bill Gates for Gavi. So he didn't know. He didn't know what. He just knew he wants to get out of the UN. So Biden came in and he's back in the UN. It's we have to get out of that. In other words, all those things were sold to us as, oh, it'll be the end of wars and it'll be so good, humanity all together. But it's the exact opposite. People, wake up. It's been the exact opposite. There hasn't been 1 month without war since World War II. We've had slaughters one after the other because nobody's held accountable. That's why.
What do you think about the World Health Organization, the World Health Immunization Agenda 2030?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that we just have to say no. Let's get out of it. And the way to do it is to force our own governments to say, we're out. We don't want to pay any dues. We're not in it. That's all. It's a very, look, they formed these things just like they formed the world financial was the settlements, the bank for final settlements. That was all done to help the Nazis. I mean, it was not at all to the free world and all that. Some free world. If we're being dictated to, we're not free.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you mind to talk me another time about your book? I think the beginning of the 10 first minutes of the interview has not been recorded. So I'm sorry. I wanted you maybe to tell me more about the book. I've heard that the title will be One World Agenda, a Global Fascist Finance Solution. Is it true?
Yeah, that's
the title.
I mean, we'll see it with the publisher, and all that. But as I say, this is a book that is really a wide scope, the history, the ideologies behind some of the things that have happened, and the authors. It covers the gamut, really. We've got historians and we've got scientists, doctors. It's a whole list. I can give you some of the names, really very, very prominent. And the way in which what the book tries to fill for people is it's meant for general public. Although I can tell you that academics will learn a lot if they read it, because they don't know this stuff either. I mean, most of the things are buried, things that they don't want, that don't serve a political and a financial purpose. They just put it away as if it doesn't exist. So the fact that this is a continuum, this is what people need to understand, that all wars have nothing to do with pride or enemies. That's really, It's always about resources, financial resources, exploitation of locals by the big, used to be called imperialists. Well, it still exists. It's sort of changed from the UK to the United States. That's the big deal. But they're still together, brothers in arms, you know, I mean, and still, you know, the exploitation. I mean, the Palestinians, I call the Palestinians the Jews of 1930s. And that is the, oh my God. Well, yes, I have a right to say that, and I'm going to say it as much as, until people listen.
You told me that you were about to write a chapter about Zionism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult chapter, you told me.
Yeah. Well, we need to know really the beginnings of Zionism and what we're seeing now. It's a continuum. There's not been a break. There's not been a big change. It's been, the philosophy was really all wrong, because it's ironic. You see, Zionists and Israelis are totally not religious. They don't believe in God. And none of the, don't keep any of the traditions and don't have use for the traditions. And the Zionists wanted also, like the Nazis, a new man, a worker and a fighter. That's not the Jewish tradition at all. But they claim ownership of Palestine because the Bible gave it to them. Hey, you don't believe in the Bible, but you think it's a deed of real estate? Makes no sense, you see. It's not valid. And they were warned, actually, Hannah Arendt warned in 1942 and 44 that if you don't make friends with the Palestinians, you're going to have constant war and you're going to rely on a big power to protect you. What kind of an existence is that? She was absolutely right. This is what you're seeing. It was wrong. There were 500,000 Palestinians in 1917 when the Balfour Declaration was made. That's not nothing. There were only 50,000 Jews and there were 70,000 Christians, but the majority were Palestinians. So you can't just disregard them, but that's what they're treating the Palestinians the way the Jews were treated. And what is so horrifying to me now, first of all, that this is like fourth generation away from the Holocaust. The world is doing nothing, just like then. The world is doing nothing. They're sitting and watching it on television, live stream. What does that say about, humanity? What does that say about humanity? There were more than, they don't even count them really, righteous Gentiles who helped Jews and saved Jews. Do you know how many there were? It's the Zionist lie is that there's always going to be anti-Semitism. You can't fight it. And after all, the Jews are not normal not to have their own country, as if a country is what means. This is a perverse thing that took root, partly because people became less religious. So Zionism became a
Mm-hmm.
It took the place of religion.
Okay. Thank you. So, mm-hmm. I think I have enough. I have asked you my question. Would you have something to add? Is there something you would like to add?
Well, I really think people should think about the babies. What kind of a world are they bringing them into? Okay. And what will they do? When I've made a lot of friends during these 4 years, especially, all over the world. And one German friend, she told me that for a long time, when Germans traveled in Europe, they didn't say they were from Germany, because the Europeans were still, when it was closer to World War II. And I also know that grandchildren asked, where were you? Where were you during, because they teach the Holocaust in German. What will people say if they go along with these monsters? When the little one, how could you have put us into slavery? That's what people need to think about. Not the immediate, I have to save my own, I don't care what happens to him. He's over there, I'm over here. That's how people are thinking. They have to think. And I think Israelis are soon going to be the pariahs like the Germans were. Traveling and Israeli? You see what I mean? Who is creating anti-Semitism? The bombing. That's creating anti-Semitism. But, as many of us are saying, hey, not me. Don't blame me. I'm against it. Totally. You can't make something that is genocidal be okay because you're doing it. No. And the other thing that bothers many of us who are survivors, and I've talked to some, is that Israel has been using the Holocaust as a justification. No. Again, that's totally no. You aren't the one, and you are betraying the victims. I'm speaking for them because I want the truth out. The truth is that's what matters. And people really, all philosophers, great philosophers, they were trying to, one of the final things that I will tell you that is important. If you look at past intellectuals, they were very broad educated. They were in the sciences and in philosophy and history and poetry, and they were rounded. They saw the world as, they were fascinated by the intricacy. Einstein talked about that all the time, the intricacy of things. What do you have now? Specialists in narrow tunnels. Neurologists, where I live, wore the mask at least until April of this year. Neurologists, think about it. Never read what's wrong with masks. That's the danger. We have to ignore the experts because they have led this monstrosity. And what they don't realize, though, is that when their use is no longer useful, they'll be discarded too. Stalin had a word for that. He called those who did things for him, the intellectual, useful idiots. As long as they're useful, fine. But when they're not, then they're idiots and you just throw them under the... We saw, look, that's what, we've got that, like Fauci. Expert liar. An expert conniver. But that's the thing. The respect for, quote, expertise has to really be discarded. It's time to discard it.